Here's what most people don't understand about Japanese real estate. The average house loses half its value in just 10 years and becomes worthless after 30. This isn't some market failure or economic disaster. It's how the system was designed to work through a philosophy called scrap and build. Japan treats homes exactly like cars, smartphones, or any other product you throw away when it gets old. Think about that for a moment. In America, Britain, or Canada, buying a house is the foundation of building wealth. Your home appreciates over time, creating equity you can pass down to your kids. But Japan flipped this entire concept on its head. Your brand new Japanese house starts losing value the second you sign the papers, following a depreciation schedule as predictable as your car's declining trade-in value. The Japanese government officially declares that a wooden house has a useful life of just 22 years. The National Tax Agency sets this timeline, and banks, insurance companies, and real estate agents all follow it religiously. Now here's the crazy part. Japanese houses don't actually fall apart after 2 decades. Modern homes there, built with quality materials and proper care, can easily last 60 to 65 years, but nobody expects them to. This creates the strangest economic reality you'll ever encounter. The land beneath a Japanese home typically holds or increases its value, representing about 80% of what you paid. But the building itself? It's treated like a wasting asset. Picture buying a beautiful plot of land, placing an expensive tent on top, then accepting that in 30 years you'll throw the tent away and start over. Why would an entire developed nation organize its housing market this way? The answer comes from a perfect storm of historical catastrophe, cultural philosophy, and economic incentives that have locked themselves together for decades. Japan's disposable housing culture was literally built from the ashes of World War II. By 1945, American bombing campaigns had flattened over 60% of Japanese cities. The country faced a housing crisis unlike anything in modern history. Quality took a backseat to quantity, as Japan launched what became known as the economic miracle, a period of breakneck reconstruction and growth. Houses built during this era, from the 1950s through the 1970s, went up quickly and cheaply. They had to. Japan needed millions of homes, and fast. This practical approach to construction planted a cultural seed. Homes were temporary structures, not permanent family estates passed down through generations. But post-war necessity alone doesn't explain why this mentality stuck around long after Japan could afford to build permanent, high-quality homes. To understand that, you need to know about the 1978 Miyagi earthquake and June 1, 1981, a date that changed Japanese real estate forever. The devastating 1978 Miyagi earthquake had exposed serious flaws in Japan's building standards. The government responded with sweeping changes to the building standards law, implementing much stricter earthquake resistance requirements. Suddenly, there were 2 types of Japanese homes: Kyutaishin houses built before 1981, which were considered potentially dangerous, and Shintaishin houses built after, which met the new safety standards. Property developers jumped on this opportunity brilliantly. Marketing campaigns convinced homeowners that their pre-1981 homes were death traps waiting to collapse in the next earthquake. Never mind that many older homes were perfectly sound structurally. The new building code created a powerful psychological divide. This pattern repeated in 2000, when additional earthquake standards rolled out following the devastating 1995 Great Hanshin earthquake, creating another wave of regulatory obsolescence. Each new regulation didn't just improve safety, it also provided a convenient excuse to demolish perfectly functional buildings and start fresh. The construction industry had discovered something beautiful: regulatory obsolescence as a renewable revenue stream. These earthquake codes intersected with Japan's unique cultural relationship with impermanence. For over 1,300 years, the Ise Grand Shrine, one of Japan's holiest sites, has been completely demolished and rebuilt every 20 years. This isn't because it's falling apart. It's deliberate practice rooted in the Shinto concept of renewal, maintaining divine prestige and spiritual purity. This ritual rebuilding serves a practical purpose too, ensuring traditional construction techniques pass from master carpenters to apprentices. But it also reinforces a cultural comfort with impermanence that extends far beyond religious architecture. When your most sacred buildings are designed to be temporary, accepting that your house might be temporary becomes easier. Tokyo architectural historian Toshiko Kinoshita finds this cultural acceptance baffling. "I cannot understand why architecture lasts for as long as an electrical appliance," she says. "The constant demolition is illogical and a huge waste. But logic isn't driving this system. Cultural conditioning and economic incentives are. The economics create a web of perverse incentives that trap homeowners in cycles of destruction and renewal. Banks rarely approve mortgages for homes older than 25 years, effectively cutting off financing for the used housing market. When they do lend on older properties, they often require full cash payment for anything beyond the land value. Real estate agents steer clients away from used homes, and it's not necessarily malicious. They're following market realities. As Mitsuo Hashimoto from Housing Japan explains, the banks and real estate agents cannot value the building beyond book value. When the financial infrastructure treats buildings as worthless after 25 years, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The construction industry has the most obvious stake in maintaining this system. Daiwa House, Sekisui House, and Tama Home, Japan's big three home builders, constructed entire business models around homes being replaced, not renovated. Until recently, these companies showed little interest in the renovation market. Why would they, when they could sell entirely new homes instead? Even Japan's tax code reinforces disposable housing. Property taxes on vacant land run 6 times higher than taxes on land with buildings. This creates the absurd incentive to keep derelict buildings standing, rather than demolish them and pay higher taxes on empty lots. The result? Neighborhoods dotted with crumbling structures nobody wants to tear down or renovate. These economic pressures created some surprising side effects. Japan now has 11 times as many architects per capita as Canada, 5 times as many as the UK, and 7 times as many as the US. With homes being rebuilt every generation, there's constant demand for architectural services. The country became what Dana Buntrock, a UC Berkeley architecture professor, calls a sandbox for architectural experimentation. Since Japanese homeowners don't worry about resale value, they have tremendous design freedom. There are no design review boards, no requirements for community approval of unusual architecture. The creative freedom is tremendous, Buntrock notes. Neighbors don't object to even the most avant-garde designs because everyone understands these buildings are temporary. The assumption of built-in obsolescence has paradoxically liberated Japanese architecture from conservative market pressures. But this creative freedom comes at an enormous economic cost. The constant cycle of demolition and reconstruction drains approximately 4% of Japan's GDP, money that simply vanishes as buildings get torn down and rebuilt. For individual families, it means housing can never serve as wealth building. Japanese homeowners are trapped in a market that guarantees negative equity as the norm. The human cost hits equally hard. While Western families might renovate and expand homes to accommodate changing needs, Japanese families often rebuild entirely. The family home doesn't become a repository of memories and history. It becomes a temporary structure to discard when its usefulness ends. The statistics tell a stark story. In the United States, 90% of home purchases involve existing homes. In the UK, it's 84%. In Japan, it's just 13.5%. The average American home gets demolished after 66.6 years, British homes after 80.6 years, Japanese homes, just 30 years on average. But here's where it gets interesting. These numbers aren't entirely accurate. They're based on a fundamental statistical flaw that shaped perceptions for decades. Government data on housing lifespans historically only tracked demolished buildings, completely ignoring structures that remained standing. A 40, 50, or 60-year-old building still in use didn't enter the statistics, creating an artificially low average lifespan. Professor Tsuyoshi Seike from the University of Tokyo has been challenging this narrative since the 1980s. The Waseda University Faculty of Science and Engineering now estimates that the average Japanese house actually lasts 64 years, more than double the commonly cited 30-year figure. The 30-year myth became so entrenched that it persists, despite evidence it was never accurate. This myth has real consequences. It shapes lending practices, insurance policies, and purchasing decisions. When everyone believes houses last 30 years, that belief becomes reality through collective action. Banks won't lend on older properties, buyers won't purchase them, and sellers can't find markets for them. But cracks are appearing in this system. Japan's demographic crisis is forcing a reconsideration of throwaway housing culture. The country's population peaked in 2008 and is now declining rapidly. By 2065, Japan expects to lose nearly 40 million people. Meanwhile, the elderly population keeps growing. People aged 65 and over now account for about 30% of the total population. This demographic shift created an unprecedented crisis: abandoned homes, or akiya. More than 9 million Japanese homes now sit empty. That's 13.8% of all residential properties in the country. Of these, 3.85 million are completely abandoned, accounting for 5.9% of all housing units. Many of these akiya can be purchased for 5 to 10 million yen, roughly $35,000 to $70,000, making them attractive to both domestic renovators and foreign investors. The numbers have grown relentlessly, from 980,000 abandoned homes in 1978 to 3.85 million in 2023. These aren't just homes in rural areas that young people abandoned for the cities, though those exist too. Many akaya sit in suburbs and even urban areas where elderly owners died and their children can't or won't maintain the properties. The expectation that homes would be demolished and rebuilt every generation breaks down when there's no next generation to do the rebuilding. The abandoned housing crisis is forcing changes in Japanese attitudes toward existing homes. Younger Japanese buyers are increasingly willing to purchase and renovate older properties, including traditional kominka houses, rather than build new ones. Construction costs for new homes have risen significantly, making renovation more economically attractive. Companies that once focused exclusively on new construction are pivoting to renovation services. Daiwa House, Sekisui House, Tama Home, and even lifestyle brand Muji are now making fortunes, refurbishing homes they wouldn't have touched in the past. Sumitomo Realty and Development and other major players are expanding their renovation divisions, recognizing that the kominka restoration market represents significant untapped value. The government is slowly acknowledging that the disposable housing model might not be sustainable. In 2015, Japan enacted the Vacant House Countermeasures Special Measures Act, allowing municipalities to force owners to demolish or repair dangerous abandoned properties. The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism, MLIT, has also promoted the Long Life Quality Housing Act since 2008 to encourage durable construction. These are small steps, but they represent recognition that the old system isn't working. Foreign investment is also beginning to change market dynamics. The yen's decline, falling over 35% against the US dollar between 1994 and 2024, has made Japanese property more attractive to overseas buyers. Foreign investors now account for around 27% of property transactions nationwide and up to 40% of new apartment sales in central Tokyo. These international buyers often have different expectations about property appreciation and renovation potential. Signs of change are most visible in Tokyo, where property prices have actually been rising. Tokyo real estate increased 12.62% year over year as of July 2025, driven partly by foreign investment and partly by growing domestic acceptance of pre-owned homes. In desirable neighborhoods, even 30-year-old properties can command premium prices based on location alone. But changing a system this entrenched won't happen overnight. The entire Japanese financial and construction ecosystem is built around the assumption of housing depreciation. Banks have lending models based on it, construction companies have business plans dependent on it, and millions of homeowners have made financial decisions assuming it would continue. Sarah Ichioka, a Japanese-American urbanist, notes that this unstable environment has created a culture that accepts cycles of destruction and renewal as a natural part of life. Breaking free from this culture requires more than policy changes. It requires a fundamental shift in how Japanese society thinks about permanence, value, and home. The irony strikes you immediately. Japan, a country renowned for craftsmanship and attention to detail, created a housing system that treats buildings as disposable products. Traditional Japanese architecture, with its emphasis on natural materials and elegant joinery, was actually designed to last for centuries with proper maintenance. The throwaway housing culture is a modern aberration, not an ancient tradition. As Japan grapples with population decline, environmental concerns, and an aging society, the disposable housing model looks increasingly unsustainable. The country that pioneered just-in-time manufacturing and lean production methods may need to apply those same principles to housing, building less, but building better, and making what exists last longer. The future of Japanese housing may well depend on whether the country can overcome the self-reinforcing cycle of cultural expectations, economic incentives, and institutional practices that turned homes into consumer products. For a nation facing an unprecedented demographic transition, learning to value permanence over novelty isn't just an economic imperative, it's an existential necessity. The question isn't whether Japan can build houses that last. Modern Japanese construction techniques and materials rank among the world's best. The question is whether Japanese society can rediscover the value of making them last. In a country where the most sacred shrine gets rebuilt every 20 years by design, perhaps it's time to question whether homes should follow the same philosophy.